I did.
Okay, so he would have covered mostly the theory and of this education through exploration and his group and what they're doing broadly.
Yes, and then he got into the habitable worlds.
Yeah.
Is the one he talked the most about.
All right.
And the work that they've been doing with that.
Okay.
We started off with the theory and moved to where they got with habitable worlds.
It's a tongue.
No,
we shorten it and just say hab worlds.
Hab worlds. Okay, so you figured out how to overcome this, right?
Yeah.
Oh man. So yeah, so he talked mainly about that.
Okay, great. That makes sense. All right. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
So you just let me know when I should get going, and I really am happy to take questions as we go, so I can kind of look at the chat box and field questions, and you feel free to interrupt.
Okay. Yeah, if you're comfortable with that, then we can kind of have it as a conversation that way.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So should we wait a few more minutes, do you think?
Yeah, let's wait a couple more.
Sure.
We've got a couple of people that usually come.
All right. So I'll focus on the adaptive learning a little bit more, and then would you also like to see some of the other courses in action? So some of these adaptive learning low-cost textbook replacements. Would you like to see some of them in action? And then and then if yes, would you also like to look a little bit at the platform that it's being that it was built, that that's being used, which is the Smart Sparrow platform, because there's an authoring tool there, and I'm not sure how much interest you have in that. It's typically for anything from basic customization of an offering to building your own courseware from scratch.
We'll probably put that out to the group and see.
Okay.
I would lean towards saying yes to all of that. We're very interested in just seeing tools that are out there and ways that they're already being used, and so that seems to fit in with what we're doing. But we can throw that out there to the group and see.
All right, very good.
Okay. So Dave, I see you just came on. We're waiting about 1 or 2 more minutes for people to see if anybody else is coming on, and then we'll get started.
Okay. Just so I remind you, I just discovered I have a conflict the next meeting, so I might not be able to make the 25th.
Okay. Thanks. Oops. All right. I guess we'll go ahead and get started now. So, hey to everyone. I'm running today. John's on here, but not really. He's at a meeting in Albany. So he hopped on a little bit ago and muted himself and is recording for us so that we can share out. But I'll be kind of guiding us this morning for the afternoon. So we have David Schoenstein. Is that how you say your last name? With us today from Smart Sparrow. And so I was going to share some of the work that they've been doing. And I guess I'll turn over to you, David. We'll go from there.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. Thanks to John for inviting me. And I think this is I haven't seen many groups doing these kinds of explorations and learning. So it's pretty cool to see. So I'll just dive into a bit of a presentation to show off what we have been doing. One clarification, I do have a salary from Smart Sparrow, but I work on a project which is called the Inspark Teaching Network, and I'll explain a little bit of what that means. So it's kind of a project inside of and run by an education technology platform, or essentially using the platform to deliver courseware. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, excellent. So also a word on courseware, since it's typically ill-defined. When we are talking about courseware, we really are talking about a low-cost or OER textbook replacement. And we are talking software, and software that sits on top of the LMS. So this is not an LMS, right? And I guess the analogy is quite good for, you know, the browser is independent of the platform, such as you know, Windows, and so that's kind of what we see this platform as. The browser opened up all kinds of possibilities, and so we're hoping that the courseware and the software that we're developing is also going to open up lots of possibilities and will be completely agnostic to the way in which you deliver to the students. All right. So, and also, you know, when we say textbook, that's good grammar to use, but you will see that this is not your typical textbook, which you know, the word textbook often conjures up pretty rigid definition, you know, a text, and you read it, and then you do a quiz. It's quite different. So the partnership here is between Arizona State University and Smart Sparrow, which is the tool that we're using for the majority, not all, of the courseware. And so Smart Sparrow is the platform that is being used to deliver the courseware. There will be other tools. And Arizona State University is a partner on a number of different projects that we're collaborating on. So we had a recent Department of Education funding to do open textbooks. So $2.5 million there as part of the Open Textbooks pilot program. And then the Inspark Teaching Network actually was originally started as a Gates Foundation $4.5 million funding for the Next Generation Courseware Challenge. So there we're developing these low-cost textbook replacements. So that's kind of the structure of the group. So I am essentially running the Inspark Teaching Network. All right, so we do run this as a bit of a professional development program. So we have a lot of colleges that are teaching partners within this teaching network, such as Miami-Dade College, and the 3 sub-awards on the OER grant is Maricopa County Community College System. There's also Ivy Tech and Miami-Dade. So I'm just going to present a few slides that we typically start with in this professional development series, because I think it's a good starting point. So we have started with the premise that we need to provide good, active, and personalized learning to students. So the emphasis has on exactly how we do that. The pedagogy has shifted over time. We've landed on this model that's called education through exploration. It's coming out of mostly of the group there at Arizona State University. They actually have a center, so it's a center for education through exploration. So we call it ETX, and we are trying to enable, for the most part, this virtuous circle of learning, really all designed to get students to be intellectually curious. So we feel that, you know, once you get a student to be intellectually curious, that, you know, they might start going beyond the learning objectives, Googling things, searching, engaged in that way, then you really, you know, as an educator, your work is done. You've captured their imagination. So the curiosity piece is really the way you draw the attention in, so the feeling, the affect, and then the exploration part of this learning cycle is the cognition. So that's how you really get to some sort of deep learning. And then to go beyond, to become intellectually curious, we will then discover which feeds on itself. So we are really focusing on curiosity because we think it is innate, and there's actually some good research around curiosity. So I have to make a case for curiosity in a second. But as principles, this is baked in really at every level of what we're trying to do with the courseware, and it is all about these three things. So conveying authentic curriculum. So that's a really important piece. Take students, contextualize their learning, inquiry based, make it real and relevant to them. So that's nothing new. Learning as a journey. You'll see what we mean by that. But for example, in an introductory biology course, you will learn biology by trying to explore the question of whether we're alone in the universe. It's kind of a narrative arc that goes throughout the whole course. That's quite interesting. Learning as a journey is really a motivational factor, a great way to spark curiosity as well. And so it kind of moves the students along, because it's not just chapter 1, chapter 2, because you're in a multiple choice exam. So then, and then the third is digital by design, and obviously lots of great things you can do when you move into digital. None of this is particularly innovative in of itself. The big experiment is, how would you do these things, especially the active learning inquiry-based part of it, in online, with digital resources, so that it is scalable. That's the big experiment, and it's still an ongoing experiment for us. So I don't think anyone has really figured that out just yet. We have some promising evaluations that were done as part of the Gates Foundation project. So we think we're on the right track. A case for curiosity, this is just some interesting research that the ASU team has been following. So for example, you could have research that suggests that there is no correlation between improved scientific literacy and your perceived risk of global warming, for example. Absolutely no correlation. And that goes to say that if you are inclined to not believe an inconvenient truth, then you will happily not follow it. And people are much more guided by politics, their bubbles and who they're talking to and what their parents vote and things like that. So it is interesting to note that improved, for example, because we're operating mostly in STEM for these projects, but we're starting to move outside, that improved scientific literacy alone is not sufficient to open you up to different explanations about the world. And that's really what we want. We want students to be really critical thinking in the 21st century, open to other explanations and good explanations, and understand what is science and what is not, and particularly what is a good explanation. So that's an interesting finding in of itself. And then if you pair that with this other research that looks at curiosity, there is curiosity as a measurable disposition. So you can actually measure a student's degree of curiosity. And that is correlated with a student's openness to engage with different political views. And so that's very interesting. So we think that the curiosity is the ticket. And then you pair that, with improving scientific literacy skills and things like that. And we think it's a good combination. So that's the argument for curiosity. I'm just going to check the chat here in case there are some questions coming in.
I just chatted to remind everybody, because we talked about you being okay with them having questions.
Okay, good. It's just sometimes in Zoom it's hard to bring those questions up, but just shout out if you have a question. I'm happy just to be interrupted. An active learning experience. So this was also interesting. There's a Nature article that really digs into the research behind inquiry-based and active learning. And it's quite a provocative statement that it would even be unethical to teach in any other way. Anyway, so that's kind of like the theory of learning design. That's where we're coming from. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any questions there? Happy to pause for a second. Otherwise, I'll press on. All right. So then I think the other interesting piece, before I dive in and actually show you the platform and what we actually mean by adaptive, because even that is really a blurry, well, there's just a lot of different ways in which you can be adaptive. I can show a few things here in terms of what, like, through the lens of why digital, I can actually show you a lot of what the project and what the platform is and what we mean by adaptive learning. So what we're trying to do is learning by doing, quite a lot of learning by doing. And that is a lot of the time using a simulation-based activity. So this is an interesting slide. There's a lot that I could say about this. It is using the Smart Sparrow platform. It is using a learning by doing experience that has intrinsic feedback, because it's really important that when you're doing a simulation and the simulation is designed well, here you're building an atom. If the simulation is designed well, then you don't need to continuously check to see if you're right or wrong. The simulation in of itself provides a lot of feedback, adaptive feedback, for you in order to know what you're doing. So now simulation by itself, in of itself, just sitting on the internet is fine, but not particularly powerful because you can't interrogate what the student is doing. So this is an example actually of a FACT simulation. Now FACT simulations are, these are built by the University of Colorado. They're fantastic. There are lots and lots of them. That you can use them as is off the internet. The issue with just doing that is that, for all you know, students are making a number of misconceptions and reinforcing them, and you as an educator can't interrogate that or guide them through a problem-solving activity. So you can't. You're limited if you're just throwing them into a simulation on the web. So here is an example of a simulation that actually wasn't built by the Smart Sparrow Learning Design Studio, although they do build lots of simulations themselves. It's using a third-party simulation, and it has brought it into the Smart Sparrow platform, added some text and questions around it, and then most importantly, exposed variables inside this simulation so that you can query the simulation when you hit next. So the student is doing something and there's a correct answer on the screen. So there is a configuration of the simulation which is correct. And the system, and using a simple rule-based system, which I can show you, has said, if the student does this and they've done that and there's the 6 atoms here and this and that, then the student has done the correct thing. They have moved the screen from its initial state to the correct state. And if that checks off, when you hit next, the system checks, is it in the correct state? If it is, great, give them the feedback for the correct answer, reinforce the learning outcome, move on to the next screen. But the most important part is if it's incorrect. Now, if it's incorrect, you can systematically check a whole bunch of different misconceptions. And the system will just go down the line, as many misconceptions as you want to target. Did they put 7 protons? If yes, let's just target that. Looks like you have 7 protons. You might want to check that. And it can systematically check for any number of misconceptions. And it's a rule-based system, so we don't need any machine learning because that's not transparent for an educator if they're trying to modify it, customize it, add more misconceptions, those kinds of things. You could bring in an algorithmic way of providing feedback in addition, but we prefer to make an environment that allows you to adjust it and see what the rules are. So does that make sense? There's a lot here. Any questions with that so far? All right. So So when we say active learning, this is what we mean. You don't need a full-blown simulation. There's a lot of out-of-the-box, drag and drop, and even a multi-select, MCQ can be quite a good active learning experience if it's done the right way. So with digital, obviously, this is another simulation that was built. You can do models, a bit more on adaptive feedback. This is a simulation that was built by the Smart Sparrow Learning Design team. So here, it's just an example. The system recognizes that you have a mismatched base pair as you build the double helix, and it provides feedback. This is in that intro biology course that I was talking about, which I can show you. We try and target the threshold concepts. Things like the structure of DNA is a hard to understand concept. So for those, we will build simulations and really try and target them. And the thing with building simulations yourself is that they can be expensive, but when you build them inside a platform, then you can actually repurpose the simulation, because you actually have built it from the ground up and you can tweak it in different ways. So the price point actually is dramatically dropped. If you design it well, you can repurpose this particular simulation to teach any number of learning outcomes. And it does. It starts with a single strand of DNA, and then it jumps up and it asks questions about the single strand, and then it asks a different question. And only at the very end, it's probably used 5 times or 6 times, do you get to double-stranded DNA. So that's useful, when you mix, it's another reason why standalone simulations are, sitting on the web. You can't easily update them, modify. You have to go back to a designer or an engineer, and it's going to take weeks. And that's an advantage of putting a simulation in a platform that can plug into. Okay, so other things that are coming down the line with the new Smart Sparrow platform is the ability to have a lot of learner insights. So we're trying to make use of all that clickstream data. So all the data in between, when the students are clicking and responding, that's a lot of interesting measurable data that you want to use as the students are going, and not wait until the final exam. So that can also be given back to the students. This is an example of the authoring environment. So you can see, if the conditions are met, and so you set a number of conditions, and this is targeting a misconception, so incorrect, then perform these actions. Take the student to the next screen. So that may be adaptively sending them to another remedial pathway, for example, and provide them with some adaptive feedback. So in the Smart Sparrow platform, for this particular tool, there are 2 ways in which it's adaptive. Adaptive feedback and adaptive pathways. And that's what we mean by adaptivity. So there are lots of ways to do this. Some do kind of like Amazon or Netflix recommendations, right? So that's a machine learning recommendation engine where they ingest thousands of questions, and then they use that as an algorithmic provide the next steps for a student. That's adaptive. It's adapting to your your learning and providing you maybe more challenging or less challenging activities, but it relies on this huge database of lots and lots of questions, and the questions are generally not really good active learning experiences. This is more like fewer adaptive pathways, not huge data sets. It's like one kind of mostly pathway that the students are going down in each of these lessons. And then every now and then there's like maybe a remedial screen, but a lot of adaptive feedback. So it's relying mostly on the feedback piece in terms of its adaptivity.
And Dave, just curious on this, is with the authoring tool, is that mostly using simulations from other places, or mostly using content that you put into this tool?
It's mostly not using simulations because like you can do a lot of great stuff without building your own simulations, and you can use them sparingly. So there are a lot. So it's mostly just drop downs and drag and drops and images and those kinds of questions that institutions, with teams of instructional designers develop, or they're making use of existing resources in different teaching networks like Inspark and like this upcoming, Department of Education, where they would be able to take it, use it as is, as a low cost or no cost textbook replacement, and if they want, adapt it.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the majority of the screens that the students are doing are mostly, they're mostly interactive, but they're not like using simulations all the time, and they're working sometimes on projects that are capstone or bigger projects that the students do, like small lessons they learn, they come back to the project. That's the Habitable Worlds course that Ariel was talking about. There they have a project in a star field where they need to look at stars and evaluate whether the stars are likely to have a habitable world. And it lasts, the whole course. So like whether it's 8 or 15 weeks, they're working on this project continuously, which is a nice way to get them on this narrative arc. So the simulations are either kind of deep projects where they write reports and they take multiple passes at them, or they're smaller, like, building double-stranded DNA helix kind of simulations that are used maybe 4 or 5 times within a lesson. But I think the most powerful thing is bringing in like out-of-the-box interactive experiences that are provided, or repurposing simulations that have already been developed. So there's a lot of functionality like out of the box, or just reusing an existing simulation. So that can make things a lot easier. And then you can just add a little bit of feedback if you want, or develop a whole new activity around a simulation. But that's important to stress, the idea that we are focusing on 2 kinds of adaptivity, and mostly, a lot of adaptive feedback, and you're essentially writing conditions. So another nice part of this is if you're building a low-cost textbook replacement, you don't want a hodgepodge of different links and URLs, which is usually like how I think, from what I've seen, most courses in an LMS, especially if you're trying to build at low cost or OER, it's typically just like a lot of different links, and sometimes not so intuitive for a student. One way we're trying to get around that with using the Smartsparrow platform is to have what we call a learn space. It's kind of like a course builder, where you design a digital navigation page where the student tracks their progress and even their progress towards understanding certain learning outcomes. So there's a bit of metacognition that can kind of sit in there. And then you'll have like a set of units, and then within each unit you can then add a series of lessons, and then you can add your institution logo and the name of the course, and click a button which produces one single URL for your students called the Learn Space. And that integrates into the LMS using the LTI integration. So that takes care of the single sign-on and the grade pass back, and gives the students a nice, intuitive one-stop, this is the only place you need to go to do your assessment and your, traditional learning from a textbook. Yeah.
David, there was a question in the chat from Jamie about
Sure.
When you develop course materials, is it by default openly licensed, or is it licensed specifically to you? And then is there a place to share it, basically?
Yeah.
Can anyone then use and adapt those after that's been created?
Yeah, good question. So the new open textbook pilot program, all that will be Creative Commons, obviously licensed and that will have the license for non-commercial, but repurpose as you want. So that will be all available, and that will not be all built in the SmartSparrow platform. I mean, actually, quite the opposite. The vast majority of that content will be curated existing OER that we will find a really nice way to bundle together, and it may contain some activities and lessons that are a bit more like immersive, interactive in the SmartSparrow platform, and in addition to a lot of existing OER. All that to say that it's not going to be all wrapped up in a proprietary platform, but it is a good platform to develop some of these activities. So that's the OER stuff. The existing low-cost textbook replacement offerings that were built as part of the Gates Foundation grant are essentially the IP is all owned by the Inspark teaching network, which in of itself is not yet a not-for-profit, like for legal purposes. I mean, it's running as a not-for-profit, but it's essentially owned by that network. And we have some partnerships with other institutions, like for Oregon State University, we have a bunch of chemistry labs that's owned by them, distributed through Inspark as a low-cost offering. And then there's even a revenue sharing model that some goes back to OSU, and then the difference is used to sustain the teaching network, namely to provide support for students and instructors, and that's how it's licensed. So if you were to use anything, you are free to use it, customize it, and then there is just a per student cost. And if you do deep customization of these courses, then that version now can essentially belong to you, the new content that you've built. But a lot of instructors, those that do, which is a small proportion, that do a very deep customization, might then go and just offer it back to the teaching network for others to use. Yeah. So, in spirit, it's very much like has the Creative Commons kind of licensing.
Perfect.
It is designed to be repurposed and reused for sure.
Okay.
Okay, so for instructional designers collaborating with faculty, there's a really nice collaborative tool, so you can visualize the flow of your lesson in the platform. So you can draw these adaptive pathways, and you can see the whole lesson. You can leave notes and comments, and if you were modifying an existing lesson or building from it something from scratch, this is quite useful. And then you can kind of double click into a screen and start editing the content on the screen, just like you would in a PowerPoint presentation. So that's a useful tool for collaboration, and it works well if the institution has a team of instructional designers that can support faculty. But there are a number of superstar faculty out there that just take it on themselves, and it's kind of siloed, which is unfortunate, but they take it on, they make modifications, or they use it as is, and they start using the platform. So this just a bit more on how the authoring tool works. You drag in a whole bunch of different inputs, so you can see on the left there are different buttons and blocks, and you can add a simulation or put in a table or a drag and drop or a video. So there's a lot you can do in terms of text responses, drop downs, all that. There's an interesting feature here when you're talking about providing feedback. You're going to simulate you're simulating an incorrect response, and then you create the feedback. So it's actually taken care of the rules that are required. You don't have to sit and say that if the student did this and did this and did this, you just actually do it on the screen as a student, right? You make the mistake, you enter some values, you do a simulation, you change the state of the screen, and then you record that as a misconception, hit a button, and then write the feedback for that misconception. And you just do it like 3 times, and you targeted 3 different misconceptions. So that's a really nice feature if you're building things from scratch. We're going quite deep into the authoring here, but I think it might be interesting for you. And then obviously all these resources are shareable. You can have like a master version, and then control who's using it, and then you can adapt from the master, and you can have like a one-click setup inside the LMS that integrates based off a master. So there are lots of tools in there as well that are good for like scaling across an institution. Oh yeah, this was a slide, back to the engagement piece. So the learning as a journey, this was the biology course, just to give you a sense. They're taken on this journey, and so it's really not a traditional sequence of learning outcomes. They start with diversity. Usually they would start with the cell, which is a very hard concepts, intimidating concepts to take on first thing. Here we've restructured it so that a student starts by looking at the diversity of life, and they go around the world, and then they go to the Galapagos. So here, the diversity of life. Then the Galapagos exploration. So they go in, they look at why species are so diverse, and they do simulations around selective pressure and adaptation. And then they go on virtual field trips, and they look at archaeological sites, and they learn that for the vast majority of time, life has been microbial. And it's only then do they fly into the cell, and they do a very immersive, like down into the cell fly through, which actually is this next screen here. This is, for example, when they get to the cell. This is probably, this is not your typical learning experience by any means, but this is one of the most immersive ones that were built. There's a whole half an hour to an hour activity here where students are flying around in the cell, clicking and dragging different molecules to kickstart different processes inside the cell in order to get a volleyball player to spike the ball. So they have to fire an axon, and so they kind of trigger this axon as part of their set of steps, and there's a lot of feedback, and then they go into detail in the next unit at every single process and break it down and understand it. So anyway, obviously this is the power of digital, right? Why digital? Well, you can't take your students into a cell in the real world. So this is an extremely powerful experience, especially when it's not passive. There are lots of good videos about with this kind of thing, but it doesn't compare to moving around, dragging molecules, seeing the processes take place, getting feedback. That's really the next level of and we hope that provides the deep learning. You can absorb much more information in this way than you might reading through a textbook and looking at lots of images. So that's what we mean. And I think, I think that's where I can leave it and field questions. I'd love to get some questions, and I can go a lot deeper and, show you other, this is the, for example, there's a learn space of the labs that we have. And I can show you the, intro chemistry course that we have as well, which is a lot of case studies that are in there. This is an example of a lab. And this is an example of a well-designed simulation. Oregon State University built this with the Smart Sparrow team. And a lot of these tools are like just kind of parameters in the back of a simulation. So you can change it. You might want to have the grams, the balance, shift more and provide more error. You can adjust it, or you might want a different kind of pipette, and you can do that. So this whole lesson might take an hour. It's all using one simulation, just walking students through the introduction, the experimentation, the gathering of data, and then, it's a virtual laboratory. Other interesting examples, this is the intro chemistry course. Like I said, we have these nice case studies in this course. And there's a really interesting one on the Flint, Michigan water crisis. So students are learning about concentration of solutions by going through the Flint, Michigan case study. And actually you're like an active participant where you're interrogating what the media said, what the government said. And I forget where it is here. Oh, here it is. Yeah, concentration lesson. So it's kind of inquiry-based learning that we're talking about. So you're actually going to be this woman who's a head of a neighborhood council, and it's good because you're invested as a student. You become invested in this story, and you also allow for some ambiguity and critical thinking when you're taking students through these kinds of activities. There isn't always a correct answer, and we allow students to pick a hypothesis and then explain why they chose that. And so that's, and this is the BioBeyond course. Things like these virtual field trips and a good example. These were developed by ASU. You're kind of flying in this, and this really highlights the guided inquiry. So, I'm free to roam around these sites and look at different things, and I can go down to the ground level. But then at some stage when I want to move ahead, I have to do something. There are questions that are going to be asked, or simulations, and it will guide me through, you need to look here, or take a look here, view this, so it's moved me back to a certain view, maybe a short video, then in some activities and simulation. So this idea of guided inquiry. So I'll pause there for a second. It's probably a lot of information. I would actually love to hear about one thing from your group. I don't know if you all were involved in this, but the development of your OER, it looks like you have developed a lot of OER already. And I saw that you have some kind of success framework that you've even published. And I'm very interested to hear, well, I'm interested to answer any questions, but I'm very interested to hear how you have, you chose the courses to target with OER, because that's the process that we're currently in. And we would love to work with different institutions that have experience doing this. In our proposal, we're calling it a pathways analysis. So we are looking at programs, and there's a focus on career pathways, and we're going to, based on a number of factors, we're going to pick a set of courses, based on enrollments and what's actually available in existing OER, and how would we augment it to active learning, and what kind of tools are available to do that, and whether our faculty in these disciplines actually are receptive to change, and all these different factors. We're going to call that a pathways analysis. And so we have the Maricopa. They have a program there called Maricopa Millions, and they're many years into rolling out OER. So we're going to use their framework, but I'm interested to see what you all have learned, if anyone here has worked on that. So did that make sense?
Yes, it did. And I'm waiting to see if anybody else wants to talk on the OER thing. I can talk a little bit about it, just how it's happened on our campus, but I'm not sure if anybody else has any experience at a higher level with how some of those decisions were made on what to target with OER. Yeah, Audie.
Hi, I can say something. I mean, I think what you're talking about is the big initiative that SUNY has as a SUNY-wide, right, it's statewide campuses initiative. And if I remember correctly, the SUNY decided to target mostly like general education courses that will appeal to a wide range of students, so we can get the best, they can get the best bang for the bucks, right? Because those courses, a lot of times, students just take them just to meet that fulfillment. Let's say intro to biology, natural science, check, and that's it. They're not really biology majors. They're not interested in biology, but we do have certain general education requirements. So that was the main target when they select the proposals that were funded for the OER projects, right? Courses that have a wide audience, that reach to a lot of students, that will save more money for the students' sake, right? If we're changing from the textbook, publishing textbook, to something that is like an OER. And I believe the move still to try to get as many courses with at least 50% OER, just to like help the students. So that's kind of like that threshold, right? 50% or more of the material being OER.
Okay.
So that's
That makes
I
sense.
think if I remember, that was the approach, right? Which ones are those lower level, mostly lower level, but those high enrollments, general education courses that we can reach out to more students and save them money.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. If there is anyone, or if you know who might be the person to talk to, we are, in the next few months, going to be making decisions about which courses to target. So any system or institution that would like to work with us in this pathways analysis would actually have the opportunity to try and guide some of the development, because like you said, we're targeting and will be targeting, the remaining high enrollment courses and some pathways that make sense. And if there is any institution that joins and says, well, look, we have this great opportunity. There's this course here with a lot of faculty very eager to, target computer skills. We would use this with X number of students. It can be a good opportunity now to join. So we are seeking any partners in the next few months, if there is anyone there.
And when you say seeking partners, are you thinking in like SUNY is a system of 63 campuses? Are you thinking individual campuses or SUNY as a whole, or either? Or when you say partners, what are you thinking about there?
Yeah, I think individual campuses is more manageable, but we would love to work with people at the system level. If there is that view from that level on courses to target. I know even just working with the Maricopa system, that's 10 colleges, and they don't exactly operate as a system all the time. It's hard coordinating. But there is that need right now for any institution to join. There's not, unfortunately, a large amount of budget dedicated to new institutions. That we have 3 sub-awards where we're going to be focusing a lot of our efforts. But there is a small amount of budget there for new partners, and just as an opportunity to guide. You may have some in, like I said, some courses that are really just begging for some really good OER resources, and we'd love to know about that.
Go ahead, Audie. Are you still muted?
There you go. It doesn't want to go out. Can I follow up? And sorry for the rest. I'm at home. Can I follow up on that? So what you're talking about, like looking for partners, and I think Chilton tried to get to that. You know, what are the requirements and expectations? Are these like partnerships so you develop new courses, or is it partnership so you're looking for people to test what you have done already? I'm in natural sciences. My background is geology. So when I saw that Arizona State University virtual field trips, I thought that was just great. And it would be great if we could incorporate some of that material. So that's what I'm asking. What are the requirements and expectations when you're looking for partners? Is it just to test what you already have done, or is it to partner and have some expectation in terms of paying money to you? You know, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Sure. So we would love both. So if you have an expensive textbook or, you know, some resource that you're using and have an interest in using, for example, the virtual field trips here, you can make a combination of the astronomy general ed course and BioBeyond. And we actually have an intro geology course, by the way. It's called Living on the Edge, about natural disasters. So if you can right now use any of those resources, then great. We would love you to. They're typically $40 per student. It kind of varies a little bit, but that's about the price point per student. So if you can displace an expensive textbook right now, that's available. And we would love to work with you and then get feedback and help you with any customization that you might need. So that's the first piece. That's mostly the existing, you know, Gates Foundation program. And then the second piece is in the development of new open textbooks. And that's going to ramp up over the next year. You know, it'll take about a year to kind of get these out to students, maybe a little shorter. But if there is interest in giving us just a few hours of feedback now on which courses you think are the best and most important to target based on, you know, a number of different factors as part of what we're calling a pathways analysis, then we would love to talk to you and get feedback. And that and if you want to, you know, take it a step further, then there's the opportunity to sign a letter of intent, you know, to kind of a little bit more officially join this program and share some enrollment numbers so we can really do the analysis, and then work with you to get the textbooks used by, you know, the faculty and on the ground. And for that, there may be some available stipends for, like, you know, for testing the new textbooks. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It makes sense, and I think this is great information. I know John is not here, but that might be, and I don't know what information he has, but it would be great if you can, like, compile an email or something and send it to John, and then John can always distribute it to us.
Right. Yeah.
And also, because it will be good, right? As a group, we're trying to at the end make recommendations and suggestions. So it will be good to have all that information.
Yeah. I can put it all together. If you want to view anything right away, there are two websites that you can kind of go to. One is this instructors.inspark.education, and I can also just put this in the chat. So you can access the student experience right away and have a look at any of the different offerings. And so that I will put in the chat. So that's here. And then if you want to just, like, have a little bit more information about the actual offerings, there's this URL which you can sign up. And then if you sign up here or anywhere on the Inspark website, someone will be in touch, might even be me, that where you can actually get instructor access to the courses, which gives you access to the BioBeyond platform, which means that you can go in and use this preview mode, which I can show you real quick here. there's also a whole series of lessons that teaches you how to use the Smart Sparrow platform. This is actually a really nice little program. You can learn, a little bit about authoring, and that's called The Journey. But we can give you access to the courses, and you would have access to, for example, I can just show you you would click into this BioBeyond demo, so you would have access to that. And then you click on the lessons here, and then you can review any of these lessons. So this is where the DNA one, you can click on preview, and it opens this instructor mode where you can review the lesson easily without having to do all the questions. So we can also grant you access to that if you just sign up. So you can start playing with in your individual lessons and screens, and there's where you can even build your own DNA.
Does
that make sense?
Two other questions that popped up. One is if you have an anatomy and physiology materials.
Yes, we do. There is a series of lessons that are lecture prep. So they're like 6 different lessons, and we actually call them a primer. So different institutions use it in different ways, but you can use it in, say, the first couple of weeks for your anatomy physiology lecture, or you can, some institutions actually are using it as a gate before they even allow students to take the course. So you can actually see which students are coming in ill-prepared, which happens a lot in anatomy physiology. And if you click on this link, there should be a product description that shows the offering, and here the lessons. You can see the lessons that are in there. So that's for lecture. We have started a lab project, and this is actually quite interesting, and it's begging for some institution to pick this up. We started a lab manual replacement, which has a pre and post lab activities. So we have one already for muscle, and you would basically import your own lab manual. So the hope is that you have a lot of instructors and different institutions have written their own lab manuals, and they just provide that to students. And you could upload that lab manual into a Learn Space and use our pre-post lab activities, and they essentially give a little intro and then have like maybe a case study that follows up. So there is opportunity for an institution that could use it with a reasonably large number of students to actually work with us and develop the rest of it, because it's only like we only have built the first few lessons in it.
Nice. And then the other question that came up was, is this something that we could be circulating to our faculty to sign up for the Inspark stuff? Is this things we can share, or?
Yeah, definitely. Anyone can join the Inspark teaching network, and you can join to sign up, and then someone will be in touch. You can join to access a specific offering, or just sign up to teach, and they send you instructions on how to get started. We have a number of SUNY institutions, I think, already working with us, and a couple I think are already piloting and using some of these. So I think I can see another lesson in here. What defines a large number of students? Oh, okay. I mean, if you are really interested in the AMP lab, then I think anything in the order of like 1,000 students a year, let's say, something like that, would really kickstart that AMP lab project again. I mean, there is one lab ready there to be used if you'd like to use it. You're welcome to use that. All right, you're welcome.
I guess the other question I had, what you'd mentioned with the Smart Sparrow, being able to author in there, is that something? Would you get started with authoring if that was something that you were looking at?
Yeah. If you are interested in that, then I would go to this. once you go through Inspark and just join, you'll get access to the Smart Sparrow platform because you'll be shared on one of these demos. So you'll have access straight away in the platform. And then if you click on Journey, there is this series of lessons that teach you about authoring in general, and then how to use this specific tool. And and keep in mind that if you go to the Smart Sparrow platform website, sorry, there's the new platform coming out, so you can actually take a look at what the new platform looks like. And that's mainly the slides that I was showing you there. That's already in beta, so it's a pretty big jump in usability. So you can get early access to this if you want.
Nice.
But the interesting thing is that the Inspark teaching network has essentially had the Smart Sparrow Studio build courses on their own platform, subsidized. The development has all been paid by the Gates Foundation. That's why the textbook replacements are low cost to students. And the Inspark teaching network is there to support instructors using it. So there's a team that will get on calls with you if you're interested in using the Inspark teaching network offerings and run you through the platform. If you want to modify, customize, or mix and match, that's what we're there for. And you can email me direct as well. I can put my email in here. Would that be useful? If it is, I will put it in. So you're welcome to email me.
Perfect. Thanks. And I think we are at time. Does anybody have any last questions before we finish up for the day?
Great. Well, thanks again for having me. I hope it was useful. And I will follow up with John with a link to everything, all the different resources that he can share on. And like I said, I'm particularly interested if anyone wants to be involved in the next few months as part of the selection of courses in OER. If even it's just individual faculty, always interested in hearing from faculty on the ground or any administrators that are working on OER initiatives.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just distribute it to the faculty here and have them contact you directly.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
That's good.
All right. Well, thank you very much again, David.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
For your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And we have our regular meeting again in 2 weeks, so the 25th.
Yes.
We'll get back together. So
Yeah, I have a conflict. I won't be at that one.
yeah. So thanks, Dave.
Me neither.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's getting towards the end of the semester when it gets to be busy. So
Yeah, nuts. I think I do think I will be there, at least for now.
okay. Great.
All right.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.